And yes, welcome back to the second part of this afternoon of GPI Paris Summit 2021. We'll open this new segment with a side event format, which is a review of the outstanding work and initiative on AI in Latin America. Because yes, let's face it, AI can accelerate progress, but it can also deepen the social divide. So how is Latin America addressing those opportunities, challenges, and a possible roadmap for AI for the social good? Our next guests are definitely have the answer, and they made it in person from Chile, Brazil, and Mexico. Huge thanks for attending in person. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm waiting for you on stage. And again, it's a great pleasure to have you all on this very stage and in person. Nayat Sanchez-P, you're the co-moderator of this session, and you're the director of INRIA Chile. And you'll definitely dive with us into this amazing discussion on how AI is definitely making a change in Latin America. Ana Cristina Bichera Garcia, you're a professor from Federal University of the state of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, of course. Ricardo Bayet, you're the professor at Northwestern University in the USA, of course, in Chicago. And you're also a professor in Spain, but also at the Universidad de Chile and Chile. Moller Rubuzzi Velasco, you're the professor Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Carlos A. Coelho, Professor, Center for Research and Advanced Studies in Mexico. Luis Martí, Research Director in RIA Chile in Chile. And definitely, last but not the least of our guest today, Senator Guido Girardi, the President of the Commission for Challenges of the Future. That's a brilliant name, by the way, for a commission. Science, Technology, and Innovation of the Senate of the Republic of Chile. And it's a great honor to have you here on stage, Sarah, because you're definitely behind Chile's scientific and technological development over the past decades. You've just made the news for promoting a pioneer legislative initiative, the Neuro Rights Law, which protects brain activity and information. It's definitely the first of its kind in the entire world. We'll dive into it in a few minutes, but for now, and without further ado, Nayat, it's my pleasure to pass on the mic to you for the session. And the mic is open.
Oh, thank you so much. Bonjour, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here in this session. I want to start by expressing my gratitude to the organization of JPI, and especially to Isabel Aklan and her team for letting us have a space in this important venue to talk about AI in Latin America. And I also want to thank INRIA and the French Embassy in Chile and the French Institute in Chile for their support. And I also want to thank our dear colleagues for accepting being here and jumping on this working group. And finally, and very especially, I want to thank Senator Girardi for joining us today. We might have some slides. Next slide, please. Next one. Yes. Well, there is no need, absolutely, to go over again on the impact and importance of AI, its potential for being an asset for the social good of all humanity, but also the concerns on societal challenges that it brings. And Latin America, and probably like other regions like Africa or Asia, has specificities in political and cultural terms that make it, on one hand, the perfect scenario for unleashing the transformative potential of AI, but on the other hand, can also be the petri dish for some of its worst outcomes. And as a matter of fact, AI seems not to be reducing the social gap in Latin America, but instead it's making it bigger and even creating its own gap, where solutions applicable to the region are far behind those available in other parts of the world. And many countries of the region, have reacted to this and have started to have national strategies and policies for AI. And however, in general terms, they have a limited horizon or are just reading in a form or full of nice to have, and do not provide a real action plan. We thought, as a group, that it was the moment to leave our opinion on the record and create this initial group that worked straightforward during the last month on creating a roadmap proposal that can serve for a positive socioeconomic impact on AI in Latin America. So, next slide, please. So, we have prepared a position paper that is a summary of our conversations, mostly, during the past few weeks. And it is not a descriptive account on different policies and situation of each country. We didn't want to do that. Or many current hurdles and limitations we face, because there are already some very good accounts and papers on this, and you can find inside it in the paper. And instead, we decided to outline a roadmap for research and innovation in artificial intelligence in Latin America. And we have guided the process by first identifying the obstacles, the challenges of AI in Latin America, and proposing a number of actions to take. We listed these actions as priority, research and innovation topics, provide a reasoning of why these topics are of particular interest, and identify scenarios that we think are of particular value for the region. Next slide, please. And we invite you to check the result of our paper. Bear in mind that this word to be a conversation starter. And we're aware that we might be missing many inputs and nuances and ideas, and this is, of course, a call for collaboration here. And please feel free to jump into this group, okay? And we have structured the work around these three pillars that you show here. What opportunities are indeed in Latin America that are particularly appealing to AI? The other one, what critical issues should be addressed or at least taken into account by researchers in the region, and one, we provide some highlights at the end by country, especially in Brazil, Mexico, and Chile. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and well, as expected, this is not a simple magical recipe.
That's quite a roadmap.
Yeah, there's not a single recipe for AI in Latin America, indeed, and we have converged to this diagram, which is an evidence of the complexity and the interdependencies of the solution of our problem. And, we don't have time now to go over all the proposals, but just wanted to underline these three components. On the left side, the obstacles associated mainly to the inequalities of the region, the political instability, the lack of long-term vision and commitment, and the brain drain. The actions on the middle associated to these obstacles and grouped by directions, like human factors, like AI research topics, core AI research topics, technological and engineering infrastructure, new business models, and institutional and government actions that needs to be taken, particularly from the region. And this is very associated with regulations and also with incentives. And finally, a set of application scenarios ahead that I hope and apply and with the idea to unleash the potential of the AI in the region. Okay, so I better stop here because we still have an interesting session ahead, and I wanted to leave the rest of the speakers to join.
But that's definitely quite a pitch out there. Thank you so much, Nayat. The last frontier of the human being is the human psyche. Building on this belief, Senator Girardi just made history with his help. Chile has passed last September the first regulation and constitutional amendment on neuro rights. It's the first country in the world to take on the advances of technology applied to the mind and to the brain. Senator Girardi, the stage is yours. Vous pouvez aller au pupitre. Nous allons vous écouter. And just a personal note, Senator Girardi is making a lot of efforts to convey this message in English.
Bon, merci. En premier terme, je vous demande pardon parce que quand je acceptais venir, je ne savais pas que c'était seulement en anglais. Et vous me pardonnez, je veux lire. Mon anglais n'est pas bien. Et ce serait intéressant de toute façon que dans le débat futur de l'intelligence artificielle peuvent participer toutes les langues, pas une seule langue. Bon, moi je suis président de la commission du futur du Sénat, and in the 2011 I presided over the Chilean Senate, and we created the Future Challenge Commission, a legislation commission body in which, along with senators, members of Academy of Science, and Chilean University didn't participate. They all have the right to speak, to vote, and they can as well present bills which has to be processed by the Commission. Since then, we have held Congreso Futuro. It's a great event every January for over 10 years, a frontier scientist dissemination event and a play to urinate new thinkings. The neurobiologist Rafael Yuste participated in one of these meetings, and he was previously commissioned by former President Obama to lead the BRAIN project. Dr. Just alerted us of the risk associated with the neurotechnologies, such as the fact that they can now read emotion, thought, and the unconscious directly from the brain, our brain. If they can read, they can also write and insert emotion, hatred, thought, life experience that the mind is unable to distinguish whether they are its own or by design. Nonetheless, this same neurotechnology can alleviate neurodegenerative disease such Alzheimer's, Parkinson, schizophrenia, depression. It must therefore be warranted that their use will respect autonomy and free wills. Rafael alerts us also about the urgency of establishing a regulatory framework as Elon Musk Neuralink was in the process of industrializing brain and brain-machine interface. The urgency of establishing neural right is due to the fact that in the 21st century, the fuel that will determine geopolitics, like oil in the 20th century, is now data. The engine that maps the economy and society are algorithms are developed from data and knowledge of the wiring of the human brain. Neurotechnologies and algorithms are programmed to capture attention because the business model of platform is to increase the flow of data. To do so, digital platform, particularly GAFAM, use addictive mechanisms through evolutionary neurobiology process that activate reward circuit via dopamine in our striatum. The capture attention and increase interaction platform develop a business model that favor fall and extreme content that proliferate to the detriment very fables contents. Thus, social networks are the paradise of post-truth. Our opinion of a terraplanist is worth the same as that of Nobel Prize winner, but it disseminates 6 times more. Fake news is a business model of the digital era. It is something inherent to the internet. It is not something inherent to the internet. Platforms were only about their power and profit, not about impact and consequences. For example, teenagers, on average, spend 6 hours a day interacting with them, stealing time from fundamental activity for intellectual and emotional development, such as reading, human interaction, sport, and art. we could say that whoever controls artificial intelligence will have indisputable political, economical, social, cultural, and military power. On the other hand, without EA, humanity will not be able to survive, feed, transport, clothe, and ensure leisure space for 9 billion humans. It is essential for tackling climate change, inequalities, understanding the origin of the universe, and continue the evolutionary mission of Homo sapiens. Therefore, the new dispute of the future will be between transhumanist vision, which is chaired by the American GAFAM and the Chinese BAT platform, against the vision of digital humanists, which seek to promote the regulation of artificial intelligence and platform. Transhumanism seeks to maintain cyberspace as a territory without nation, law, regulation, or common gods. They aspire to a world governed by individualism and conception of total freedom, without the existence of a superior interest. For transhumanists, technology must be the only normative power, which is incompatible with democracy. For digital humanists, AI and technology are fundamental for the survival of humanity, but there must be law, ethical and moral norms that regulate it. A world without law, without rule, is an unregulated territory where the law, the strongest, prevail. The challenge of digital humanists is to redemocratize the Internet, to recover Tim Berners-Lee's original dream. The Internet is as a public space for collaboration, inclusion, and democratization of power. AI and ethical challenge as human rights and civilization could fade away in the virtual world. We claim that universal rights must be guaranteed in all areas and spheres of human life, in both the physical and the virtual reality. There is a gigantic asymmetry in human rights between the analog and the virtual world, as well as the absence of regulatory framework that allow for democracy, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, autonomy, and free use of human. If a postman open and read the mail he carries, he will be punished for privacy violation. Google read emails, analyze them, process them, appropriate the information, and commercialize it all, and sanction. Thus is normalized and socially accepted. For this reason, with Rafael Yuste, the academic of science and University from Chile, we propose a constitutional amendment that establishes scientific and technological development at the people's service. Firstly, it's recognized that science and as a means to achieve the well-being of the individual. Secondly, it associates brain activity and information with the human physical and mental integrity as a fundamental right. Hence, is allowed to fail a constitutional action if breached. Thirdly, it's allowed to establish brain protective restriction to any scientific and technological development only by law. All the above remain within the fundamental right and constitutional supremacy principle framework which force to maintain the rule of law. This is followed by a draft law regulating neurotechnology directly. instruct the state to promote development and ensure not discriminatory access to its advance. Thereafter, it established a status of responsibility for protection of neuro rights and the use of neurotechnology according to their field of application, such as scientific research, health care procedures, others. Specifically, any neurotechnology used must be consent in terms of privacy. This law assimilates neural data to sensitive data and refer its protection to the status of consent. Regarding the device, it constrains the neurotechnology to be registered by the Public Health Service, which may restrict their use. Then liability is adjusted in criminal, civil, and administrative law while these devices are used. Finally, the bill regulating digital platforms refers to the use of neurotechnology indirectly. This bill began with the principle of universality of access and equivalence in right in both the digital and physical world. We are debating about the platform duty to alert of manifestly false message, also to inform of pornographic or violence content when entering the platform, and to warn the user when interacting with AI. Moreover, the law guarantees the right of individual private life to be forgotten and to have a digital death, determining inheritance and testamentary rules. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Senator, for reminding us about this crucial right that is to defend our brains from any AI doomsday, actually. And if you guys do have a question for Senator Girardi, is still with us until the end of the segment and the session. He will definitely answer in French, but we'll do our best with Nayat to wrap it up in English if you need to dive in a discussion with Senator Girardi. So now, the discussion is open.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. Well, thank you, Senator, for good introduction and the need of the work on regulation on AI and technology in general. And I would like to have a fruitful discussion with the rest of the panel right now, and with the challenges, but also the opportunities of AI in the region, in Latin America, and coming from Latin America, not only developing, but also coming from Latin America. And for that, I will start with the first round of questions. Of you to the speakers, for them to have their position of the work that has been done during this month, and also to have their positions, especially their positions of the country they are representing. So I will first start with Baeza. Ricardo Baeza, I would like to start with you. You have an important experience in information retrieval, biases, ethics, and AI, and among several. And you have a very interesting career. Well, you're Chilean, but you also lived and have a career in the United States, but also developing in Spain, in developed countries. But you have managed to stay very connected and very attached to Chile. And you are also professor of the University of Chile, part of the Chilean Academy of Engineers, and many other institutes. And I wanted to ask you, because Chile, as many other countries in the region, have recently launched a couple weeks ago their national policy for AI. And in this respect, in your opinion, what are the main challenges for Chile to be fully impacted at the end by the local development, deployment, and adoption for AI? If you can introduce more or less about this. Yes. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Nayat, for the invitation. I have many hats. The main one is I'm the new Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University, which my campus is in Boston. But also I keep ties with Catalonia and also Chile. And recently, this year, we founded a new NGO that wants to basically use AI fairly in the region. And our first project is the Inter-American Development Bank to help other countries. So we did a full study of more than 30 strategies in the whole world. But here I'm only showing the ones that are in Latin America. Sadly, I had a nice animation, but the animation was over after the PDF and COVID. So basically the idea is that if the flag is small, then it's the first step, and then when the flag is bigger, it's the second step. And if the flag doesn't grow, it's because they haven't finished the second step. So the first two countries that started doing something were Mexico and Uruguay. Uruguay was focused only in digital government, but had an AI section. Then Colombia was the first one that did everything, and it's the most complete one. I will mention exactly why. Then in 2019, also Brazil published the first version that went to consultation. I hope I have the dates right, because here we have two Brazilians and also a Mexican. And then Argentina only presented their strategy in December 2019, and then the government changed, and I guess it's somewhere in a desk. So it's not published officially, but we have a copy of it. Then in middle of 2020, Mexico did it. Then the first version of Chile was done at the end of 2020, also went to a consulting period. Then in middle of this year, Peru published their first draft. It's not yet final. And then later this year, very recently, both Brazil and Chile did the final version of their strategy. Next slide. So here you have a quick syntactic comparison. So it's very hard to compare these strategies. But for example, here is the total number of pages in blue, and then how many pages are given to the axis, so basically the main topics and the measures of each strategy. So you see that they are very different. For example, I cannot see, okay, here I have it. So here, so Colombia has not too many pages for the exact measures, but for example has a budget and has a governance on how to do it. That's why they take more on the other side. Next slide. So just to have a quick comparison to the semantic part, the content. So the most common Ibero-American access, here we include also in our study Portugal and Spain. So I didn't have the numbers for only Latin America. So basically all of them worry about research and technology transfer. 93% of them, the industry ecosystem. 93% of them, basically the government. 86% of them, talent training and attraction. And then 71% are data platform and policy. So these are the 5 main problems that they are worried about. Now, the highlights, already mentioned some of them. Colombia is the most complete one. They have a clear budget, a clear period of action, a clear governance, and then also they have a separate document on ethics that they publish after the strategy in the mid-2020. Mexico is very interesting because it's a multi-stakeholder approach. A proposal is from a company that I'm also working with, C-Minds. It's a female company, so it's very interesting. And they're basically putting all the society of Mexico to think about that. The government, industry, and also civil society. So the consensus is much higher than any strategy in the world. The problem is that very hard the government to basically take it and do it because it's not exactly theirs. So they're in good things and bad things. And finally, Uruguay is the one that really focuses on digital government. Next slide. So now I will finish with a small summary on the new strategy of Chile. So as I said before, was published first in December of 2020. There was a very short period of consulting in January, which is not the best month in Chile because it's summer. So we would have been better with a longer period. But still, they got a bit more than 200 replies. And those replies were, I guess, incorporated in the final version that was published just like end of October. So it's still warm. And there are 4 principles, which are a bit different from other strategies. One is basically centered in well-being, human rights and security, sustainable development, inclusion, and globalization and change. Next slide. And then the axes are, and these are the one a bit different from other countries that basically have access on different sectors. Here are habilitation factors. Here we have 11 goals, and they're mainly in talent and technological infrastructure and data. Then you have development and adoption, 7 goals there. And basically this is the main axis in all the strategies: research, technological transfer, innovation, digital government, and so on. Then I guess the last one was everything that was not in the previous 2, so it's ethics, regulation, and societal impact, 10 goals. And here you have a more miscellaneous group of measures, including the future of work, e-commerce, which is interesting because I haven't seen it in other countries, industrial property, cybersecurity and defense. Here, if you put defense, there is a problem with ethics, so I would have preferred not to put ethics and defense together. And then gender as a special bias to consider. In the second version, they had an action plan where there are 80 priority actions inside these goals, and then those 80 priority actions, they have 184 initiatives, and these are to be developed until 2030, so basically 10 years to do all this. But there's no budget and there's no clear governance, which is common to almost all the strategies in the world.
Thank you, Ricardo. And I think this is a big challenge.
Yes, that's a big challenge. How to do it is the main challenge.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to go through Cristina right now in Brazil. And Cristina, because you have an amazing experience in AI in Brazil, and you have been in the convergence of academy and industry for so long. And and with the strong connections with industry, and Brazil, as Ricardo was saying, was one of the countries that recently also launched its national strategy for AI, and it's also well renowned in the region for the good education programs in AI, for the high-ranked universities and the research centers and the high-quality talent at the end. And I would love to have your position on 2 important topics. In my opinion, with respect to Brazil and AI, this is education and regulation. And because I think that they are very connected, and probably with the rest of Latin America, but had its own specificities. So please, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Nayad. Actually, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to start thanking the GPA organizers for inviting me, and especially Nayad. And before answering directly your question, I want to give a proper context in what I'm going to talk. So I'm going to start talking about the AI opportunity for Latin American countries, especially Brazil, and the incentive required. And when I say incentive, I'm considering education as the major factor, the regulation, that we need to talk about the regulation, and last but not least, the risks of social inequalities stretch. Next slide, please. So, as you know, Brazil is a large country with a huge social inequality. The country has about 2 trillion GDP, but with very low productivity. So the aggregate output per worker could triple if the total factor productivity was similar to US. So we believe that AI can be this booster for providing the economy jump, not only for Brazil, but I think this is the same for other Latin American countries. But we need investments. Next slide, please. The public sector is investing in AI. So we have this year was launched, the government launched the national policy for fostering development of AI and providing financial incentives to universities, companies, and startups. The private sector is still timidly following what the public sector is doing. The Brazilian University, we are doing our job. So we have about 300 public universities and more than 2,000 private universities. All computer science courses offer at least one AI course. We have 3 public universities offering a degree in AI and data science. So although we are actually preparing high-skilled workers, we don't have much jobs with good salaries that are maintaining our skilled workers. So we are witnessing the evasion of talents, what we call the brain drain effect. So every presidential election, and we are going to have one very soon, we have a completely different strategy put in place, and this gives like misleading signs to the private sector. This discontinuity of planning and investments fostering innovation actually damages the hope of our young talents, so they will evade. So let me go now to your second question about regulation. Please, next slide. We are talking about regulations for quite a long time. So AI can bring, like, as I said, can foster development, but at the same time that can augment humans, it can also bring some problems like bad judgment, biases, decision bias, fake news, fake faces, fake realities. So, and not mention the monitoring, the excessive monitoring of citizens' behavior. So we need to think about regulation, and the government actually, the government have launched last October, no, was approved last October, right now, this year, a national policy regulating AI. And it was approved in the House of Representatives and is now in the Senate. So we are facing right now we are living about this regulation, talking about that. And although it is, of course, it is talking about AI cannot harm society nor the environment, it's also defining responsibilities for developers and deployers. Oh, and also it's saying that the human in the loop should be for all tasks. And this is feeding a lot of discussion in the academic society about the need for all of this imposition of we should have like some assessment of the risks before going to this whole impediment of whole law of human in the loop. Since AI is a hot topic, legislation is mushrooming at state and city levels. For example, right now in Rio de Janeiro, my city, there is a law proposal to ban completely facial recognition. So it is a challenge to define a regulation that will protect citizens and environment, at the same time will not impede, will not hinder AI development. And last, we need to last slide, please. And last, we need to talk about the risks of increasing the social inequality. So AI can augment workers to improve productivity, but it can also lead to waves of unemployment. We can think that, well, there are going to be, as in previous industrial revolution, other jobs, so jobs will arise, but what about the income? Maybe we have more jobs, but AI will lower the income of the workers. So how we are going to survive? What's going to happen with the unskilled workers? So we need to think about that and to offer solutions about that. For example, the universal basic income, or the companies that are going to share the profits with every worker, even the doorman, or the citizens are going to own the technology and get profit for that. I don't have a solution. to propose. But this is a call that we need to discuss about this problem because we need to address the social inequalities that AI will stress. So in summary, AI is an excellent technology and is going to boost and is going to allow Brazil and other Latin American countries to leapfrog the development stages. We need to invest in that, but creating jobs that will maintain our skilled workers, our skilled talents, we need to regulate without hindering AI development, and we need to talk about the social inequalities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cristina, because indeed this is very well. We could be here the whole afternoon discussing about it, and I wanted, due to time, I wanted to go through a more specific question with you, Carlos. And because, I mean, you have an important experience more in optimization, meta heuristics, and of course, it's an area of artificial intelligence that is getting more and more momentum. And in your experience, well, I will take the advantage that you are here to ask you this more specific question about the opportunities, because we have been discussing the challenges, okay, and more in the opportunities indeed of AI and with respect to specific meta heuristics and optimization. What role do you think that these approaches can play with respect to the development of the region and in your experience with Mexico, if you can position on that?
Sure. Thanks for the invitation. First, can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. So in meta heuristics in particular have had a great expansion in Latin America. This is certainly true not only for Mexico, I will say also for Brazil, Argentina, even Chile. And it's very interesting because it has penetrated not only computer science, but also related areas in engineering. Particularly, I will say, in Colombia, for example, is very strong in automatic control. There are many people working on fuzzy logic. Also, in the case of Mexico, in physics, chemistry, and mathematics. So from academia, there is a lot of awareness about the importance of meta heuristics and the way in which they can interact with certain applications related to AI. But another aspect which I believe is also very interesting is that there is not only a community in academia, but also a lot of interest in private industry. There are companies now in Mexico that are developing AI solutions using meta heuristics, particularly for applications related to forecasting, to optimizing routes of vehicles, for example, for delivery, for also making some sort of forecast of the sort of products that could be sold in a particular region. And this is something relatively new in Mexico because in the past there were companies developing applications that were sold in the US, but they were not that common in Mexico because several companies were a bit reluctant to adopt these solutions that were developed in Mexico. They wanted to buy solutions developed abroad, even though many of these solutions were developed by Mexicans working in the US or in Europe. But this is very typical in Mexico. It's still true for large companies, but there has been a big change in the last few years. Another interesting thing is also this increased interest in meta heuristics can be reflected by the number of events. Like in Mexico, we now have many events, some of them organized by the federal government related to AI. And also, I believe this interest is reflected by the fact that, for example, the two largest conferences on evolutionary computation have already taken place in Mexico and one of them in Brazil. So these big international conferences are now coming to Latin America because they realize, the regular attendance, that there is this increased interest. So can you go to the next slide, please? So basically, I will say we have many opportunities now in Mexico in a different way of what it was probably 15, 20 years ago, in the sense that we don't have to go now to the US to develop these solutions and to do a serious career on AI, although we face the same challenges that Cristina mentioned in Brazil, that salaries are still low. We also have undergraduate degrees in AI, but not that many jobs that are well paid. And perhaps the greatest challenge in Mexico is that we don't have much continuity with the federal government. We have presidents for 6 years, but there is no long-term commitment for long-term projects. Because even if the new president is from the same political party, there is no guarantee that there will be continuity. So that makes things very difficult. And the other challenge is that sometimes the federal government has policies that work against projects. In Mexico, 2 years ago, we proposed the creation of a research institute on AI. And the typical thing that happens in Mexico, they of course say yes, they never say when. So we're still waiting after 2 years because there is no funding. There seems to be a lot of interest, but there isn't funding for these sort of projects.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And yeah. It is and contrary to this, I have to say that in Brazil, there's a lot of funding right now for research centers, and Marley in this, well, is a very renowned fellow in Brazilian agencies, CNPq, FAPEG, and you have a vast experience also in bridging this gap of AI in academia and industry for so long. And you're also representing Brazil at JPI right now in the group of Responsible AI, and you are the director of a center of AI at Rio de Janeiro, right? And in this respect, I want to ask you about your perspective and behind, well, which are the commitments behind these kind of centers in Brazil, which is the vision in terms of the approach of development of responsible AI? What's your position on this? How can you tell us?
Well, again, I want to thank also the organization and, of course, NIAT for the invitation to be here. Next slide, please. So as you mentioned, NIAT, Brazil very recently actually started and launched this program to approve a few centers, and these centers are supposed to be organized in a network, so it's basically to put together universities and companies all over Brazil in certain topics, like it's highlighted here, like health, agriculture, industry, and smart cities, which is very good, although we have many problems in Brazil lately in terms of science and technology and education ministry because of lack of sponsorship. But anyway, because of all this AI in the whole world, they started and approved these 3 centers recently. And it's also sponsored by the federal government, but also from the state of São Paulo, because it's the richest state in Brazil. And Rio de Janeiro decided to copy that. And the Foundation for Research, is called FAPEG, has also approved 3 recently centers with a group of universities and companies, but based in Rio de Janeiro in this case, and also in specific areas like renewable energy, climate change, oil and gas, education, agriculture, because in Brazil it's something very important, in smart cities as well. So this one that NIAT just mentioned, it's an AI research in Rio de Janeiro. It involves 6 different universities and many companies inside Rio de Janeiro. Initially supporting oil and gas industry because it's something very strong in the state of Rio de Janeiro, but also focus in order to try to have a long-term center sponsoring not only from the government, but also from different companies in the future, and in smart agriculture and also health. And answering your question, in terms of the committee, it's actually written, the focus is to generate, as is written there, disruptive solutions with the potential to revolutionize how we live, interact, work, learn, evolve, and communicate, provide socioeconomic benefits to society, improve quality of life, leverage economic prosperity, and solve big problems that has no solution today. So the idea is very, of course, try to solve all these problems considering all these details, but we have some challenges. So next slide, please. So basically, I think it has already been mentioned by Cristina, by Carlo. It's something that we have in common in Latin America, in Brazil, but not only in Brazil, in Mexico. And this is this long-term financial support, because this has been started last year, but the centers actually received the first income this year. And it's a 5-year project, but in Brazil we have a long history of starting. You said that sometimes you have the project, but you don't know when. In Brazil, sometimes we know when, but at the end, we don't receive the whole amount. So it's something that we need to solve and to have this more long-term support. And the idea is to convince industry, because in Brazil, as already mentioned to Christina, in terms of universities, we have very good courses, very high-rank postgraduate courses, and we teach also undergraduate AI. And this is very good, but the problem that the difference in terms of social, and in the schools we don't have this, and very few people actually in Brazil go to university in terms of percentages. So although we have very good courses, not everybody has access to the university. So in order to provide the centers for a long term, we need also to gather the industries and companies to support this research. Because in Brazil, usually the research has been sponsored by the government. And so we need to strengthen this link with the industries. And another important thing is that we form all these very good students, we have very good researchers, but because they either go to academia, but the salaries are not good, as has already been said, so it's something that we need to try and solve this in order to keep the good researchers in Brazil. So I know that.
Thank you so much, Marley. Yeah, and this is a problem that we all share in Latin America. And Luis, coming back to the opportunities, I want you to position on that, and I want you to position also in the roadmap that we have been doing in the work of this group, and it's something that we have been discussing during our work, is how can AI be a factor of development in the region at the end, and well, do you think that we need a form of localized AI in the region meant to address particularities of Latin America? What do you think on that? If you can answer also with respect to the roadmap that we develop here in this work.
Yes, does this work? Yeah. So, well, thank you for this opportunity of exchanging these ideas, and for me it's really important to not only, let's say, understand what is happening in different countries in the region, but also try to find a way of, in spite of all the problems that we have, still be able to move forward. No? I am going to quote my father on this, that he used to say that doing science in Latin America was like making fire under the rain. No? It's always hard. But you need a lot of passion. But I think that, well, first of all, science is the same everywhere. No? There is not the particular, like the law of gravity still applies, it's the same in Latin America. But it's true that because of all of these conditions that we have been discussing, probably we need some special attention to some particular aspects, and in particular of AI, we would need some, yes, actually, I have, next slide, please. There are some characteristics that we need to look at when doing science. No? First of all, we have been discussing before, and I am fully aware, I am a machine learning guy, so as Francis Bach, I think, was saying, I see everything as a machine learning problem. Not all AI is machine learning, but one of the few consumables, or the main consumables of AI, of machine learning in particular, is data, no? And one of the problems that we keep facing continuously in Latin America is the issues that we have with data, that we can trace that to the lack of a culture of transparency in the long term, but also a relatively recent onboarding on digital technologies and all of this, no? And besides that, then we have that because of the diversity and the locality of many characteristics of Latin America, it's very hard to extrapolate some existing results that you have from other regions. The prototypical case is natural language processing, no? That most of it is done in the main other languages in the world, and there is few support for the two main languages of Latin America, Portuguese and Spanish. And then we have the additional problem is that we have a lot of dialects inside Latin America. So, and we have been joking all the time how we speak differently, and even we convey different ideas with the similar words. So these nuances make this problem additionally complex, no? And we also have another issue that has to do with the other, let's say, non-European or non-imported languages that we have in the native languages that are very poorly documented. They are not even corpuses, not annotated. They don't have a lot of texts on this. We have had some projects in India and Chile trying to work on this, and it's very hard because you don't have raw material to work on. So it's the first main challenge. The same thing with the difference of physiognomy and all of this, that we know that this is not a particular issue of Latin America only, but it's severe in the case of Latin America, no? And it is becoming more and more important. Then, let me read a little bit here. We already spoke on the issue of regulation, all of this. I know that we are running out of time, so I will not stop on this. Then there is another important topic that we need to look at, that is the characteristics of the deployment, no? In many cases, we need to realize that there is not going to be a really capable hardware, or the hardware will not be consistent across different devices, all of this. So we need to rethink how we do AI. This is not only for Latin America. There is a big trend on how to make AI more accessible or more sustainable, more scalable, in the sense that we have these huge language models and all of this. It's something that we eventually are going to be able to tackle, because it's a key issue of AI probably in the next steps. But this is even more dramatic in the case of Latin America. So in many cases, when we do computer science, we need to revisit how we do it to make it accessible and all of this. Then, and to try to finish with a positive note, I think that also there are a lot of interesting opportunities in Latin America. There is not only problems, no? We have a lot of particularities. I can name, for example, in Chile receives 70% of all the astronomical observations of the world. So for someone that does machine learning, this is like a swimming pool full of data needed to be processed. Right now, astronomy is another form of computer science. I hope that there are not any astronomers in the room, but it is like that, because what they do is they analyze a lot of data. We have other cases of problems like climate change and all of this, that we have the Amazon forest and all of these that are like ideal challenges to also make AI get better. Not only AI helping Latin America, but also AI get better thanks to Latin America. So thanks. I know that.
Thank you so much, Marva.
Well, thank you so much. It was actually a very, very precise and very in-depth state-of-the-art of what's going on in Latin America when it comes to AI strategies and like draft for regulations and way to foster a better inclusive AI community, I guess, for each of your countries. Questions are definitely open. If you do have some questions to address to our outstanding panelists, I can either take one of your questions online, or you can raise your hand and definitely make yourself heard. If you want to, like have a reaction, challenge, deep dive into one of the many different strategies for artificial intelligence that we've been featuring here on the panel. And we do have one question, actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this amazing panel. I really don't know enough about AI in South America. I'm over here. I was wondering, and I don't know if this is actually adequately about AI or not, but just in this regulatory framework, you know, that in the EU we're building the AI Act and the Digital Services Act and all these things to try to handle basically some large companies that are not domiciled in the EU, although also to make sure that our own governments use AI appropriately. Is there any effort within South America to harmonize some of these laws and to use sort of the collective power of 400-odd million people to affect how AI is being expressed in South America, especially coming from outside influences?
Thank you, Joanna, for the question. Great question. Europe is always the example for Latin America. So, for example, GDPR was already localized in Brazil. There is a law that has been a long time in Chile, but has a lot of things from GDPR and so on. And GDPR has good things and bad things. We already know in Europe. It's hard to enforce it if a country, for example, would like to keep the taxes. And also it's a one-size-fits-all, which is a problem when you have a small business that has to comply as well as the multinational. And in the case of the proposed EU regulation for AI, I'm even more afraid that that is not what we want to copy, so I have a strong opinions on that. So, for example, first, I believe that we shouldn't regulate technology, because next will be blockchain and then quantum computing and whatever we invent next. We need to do something like human rights. It works for any place in the world, for any person, and we all agree at least on those rights, including privacy. So we should do something per sector if it's necessary. We are already doing it in health. We are already doing it in food. And other countries have done it in even other areas. So we should do something that is basically based on the problem and not on the technology we use. And that should help for any technology that we use to solve a problem. We shouldn't have to regulate any time that we have any technology. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that if people copy it anyway, a risk-based approach is very dangerous, because first, the risk is a continuous variable. So risk could be from 0 to infinite. And they decided to divide it in 4 classes: forbidden, high risk, low risk. I don't know why it's not medium risk, and then no risk. I already see the game of the companies. What we need to say to be in no risk? Okay, we can't say that. Okay, what we need to say to be in low risk? So that will be very hard to enforce, will be very hard to work, and it's like doing a self-assessment, because part of the regulation says you have to do a self-assessment, and there is research that shows that you are, basically, you believe that you are better than you are if you do a self-assessment. When you are a student, you are always better than you are, right? At least for your teachers. So I see many risks, and I don't know what is the solution, but I believe that we should maybe take a completely different approach. But I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a regulator, so I don't have the solution, but I don't think that's the best solution. That's my personal opinion.
And we'll definitely have tomorrow a more in-depth session about regulation, and see how different continents and governments are thinking about a better regulation, smarter regulation. Does it have to be tech-centric or not? We'll see it definitely tomorrow all together. Another question here on the second row, sorry.
Hello. Over here in the front. My name is Ronaldo Lemos. I'm a professor in Brazil. Thank you for the great panel. And I have a question for the Brazilian speakers, but I think everyone should feel free to jump in, which is national AI plans. I think they're very much desirable, but the challenge, especially in Latin America, is implementation. So I would love to hear more what would be the next steps for implementation, and how other countries also in the region see this particular problem. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to start answering, but please go. What is happening? There are some sandbox tests. So the São Paulo government is right now testing the AI regulation with 2 procurement projects. One for hiring a company to design railroad track preventive maintenance system. So it's like, well, what's the problem? It's like when you put the camera, depending on where you put the camera, for instance, you can collect images when you are approaching the station. And since you collect the picture, you can do something else. And so this is like slightly challenge for them. And the other one is for hospital, the clinic hospital. So this is with lots of sensitive data. I am following what's going to happen because it's going to be a very good sandbox for testing the regulation. As the incentive, I think that Marley is a good example. The Center of Excellence, right? It's a way of investing on AI development, doing like universities network with companies, with startups. So it is a good starting point. But we need to see, it's still young, what will be going to be the results, since we are not sure how long the investment will last, if any. So I'll let Marley to
Happy. No, it's exactly what Cristina just said. And you are Brazilian, you know the problems. So it's something that it's very good, this strategy to create these centers. And I think it's fantastic because we are, of course, a huge country with people working in the same area but in different places. So when you create a national network of excellent academians, so it's very good. The main problem, the main challenge is how we are going to continue this, because we know that the government financial support might not continue, and that's why it's a challenge for us to actually convince the companies to start actually increasing the sponsorship for this research, because usually they want something on the shelf, they want something for tomorrow. They don't invest a lot in research in Brazil. We have some, of course, programs that with electricity companies and oil and gas companies, because in Brazil there is a law that 1%, these companies, electricity and oil and gas, they have to spend 1% of their income in research and development, which is great. But even so, most of the companies, they don't have this common strategy to support research and ask for something that will actually be disruptive. So that is the challenge, and we don't know because it has just started this year. So let's see. Fingers crossed.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, because an upcoming event is definitely bubbling up in the north of Paris. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your perspective on the way Latin America is taking on AI challenges. Definitely dive into more questions tomorrow. That's definitely the end for day one here. If you're watching us live and through the streaming platform, we'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely for the second day of a JPI Paris Summit.